What happens when a truth so powerful is spoken in a courtroom that it leaves everyone speechless, including one of America's most beloved judges? Your Honor, I didn't steal that food because I was hungry. I stole it because my daughter was. The words hung in the air like a thunderbolt. Judge Frank Caprio froze, his pen suspended above the papers, his eyes filling with tears he couldn't hide. What happened next would become the most emotional moment in courtroom history. It was Judge Frank Caprio's final week on the bench after 38 years of serving justice with compassion in Providence, Rhode Island. The courtroom was packed with media, knowing that this legendary judge, famous for his humanity and viral moments of mercy, was hearing his last cases. But nobody, absolutely nobody, expected what was about to unfold. The defendant was brought in wearing handcuffs. Michael Rodriguez, 52 years old, homeless for 3 years, charged with shoplifting $47 worth of groceries from a local supermarket. His clothes were worn, his face weathered by life on the streets, but his eyes held a dignity that hadn't been broken by circumstances. Judge Caprio looked at the case file, then at the man standing before him. This seemed like a routine case, one of thousands he had presided over. A simple theft, a desperate man, probably another story of addiction or mental illness that had led someone to the streets. But Michael Rodriguez was about to shatter every assumption in that courtroom. Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Caprio began with his characteristic gentle tone, "You're charged with shoplifting. The security footage is clear. You took items without paying. How do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor," Michael replied without hesitation. His voice was steady, clear, and carried a weight that immediately caught the judge's attention. "And can you tell me why you did it?" Judge Caprio asked, expecting the usual answers he had heard thousands of times before. Michael took a deep breath. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to reveal. "Your Honor, I didn't steal that food because I was hungry. I stole it because my daughter was." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Caprio's pen stopped moving. The bailiff looked up from his paperwork. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. "Your daughter?" Judge Caprio asked, his voice softer now, sensing this was not going to be an ordinary case. "Yes, sir. She's 7 years old. Her name is Emma. She lives with her mother, my ex-wife, about 10 miles from here." But nobody knew that Michael was about to reveal something that would change everyone's understanding of sacrifice. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his judicial demeanor giving way to human curiosity and concern. "Mr. Rodriguez, if you don't mind me asking, if you're homeless, how is your daughter involved in this?" Michael's eyes began to well up, but he maintained his composure. "Your Honor, 3 years ago, I lost my job as a construction foreman. The company went bankrupt. I couldn't find work that paid enough to keep up with the rent and child support payments." He paused, gathering strength to continue. "I had a choice. I could keep my apartment and stop paying child support, or I could give up my home and make sure my daughter never went without. I chose her." The weight of his words hit the courtroom like a physical force. Judge Caprio felt something he hadn't experienced in decades on the bench. His throat tightened, and he had to clear it before speaking. "So you've been homeless for 3 years, by choice?" "Yes, sir. I sleep in my truck when I can afford gas, or in shelters when they have space. But every month, without fail, I send $800 in child support to Emma's mother. It's court-ordered, but even if it wasn't, I would do it anyway." Subscribe now and comment what you think about Michael's choice, because what Judge Caprio says next will restore your faith in humanity. The prosecutor, who had been preparing to argue for the maximum penalty, quietly closed her file. She had never encountered anything like this in her 15-year career. Judge Caprio removed his glasses, something those familiar with his cases knew he did only in the most emotionally charged moments. "Mr. Rodriguez, help me understand. You stole $47 worth of groceries. If you had $47, why didn't you just buy the food?" Michael's answer would become the most shared courtroom moment in internet history. Your Honor, I had exactly $43 in my pocket. It was all the money I had left after sending this month's child support payment. I needed $47 worth of food because I was going to see Emma that afternoon, and I promised I would bring lunch for both of us. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. I calculated everything perfectly. Sandwich meat, bread, her favorite juice boxes, some cookies she likes. But when I got to the register, the tax put me over by $4. I panicked. I couldn't disappoint her again. She had already asked me last month why I looked so thin. Judge Caprio had to use every ounce of his judicial training to maintain composure. But his voice betrayed his emotions. So you risked arrest, a criminal record, possible jail time, for $4. Your Honor, if you had a 7-year-old daughter who asked you why you look hungry, you would understand. There is no risk I wouldn't take to keep my promise to her. But Michael wasn't finished. What he said next would leave not a single dry eye in the courtroom. Judge Caprio stood up, something he rarely did during proceedings. He walked around his bench and approached Michael directly, abandoning all judicial protocol. Mr. Rodriguez, in 38 years on this bench, I have never encountered someone like you. Michael looked confused, as if he had done something wrong. Your Honor, I know I broke the law. I'm ready to face the consequences. I just couldn't let her down again. Judge Caprio's voice cracked as he spoke. Let her down. Son, you gave up everything for her. You've been living on the streets for 3 years, sacrificing your own comfort, your own dignity, your own safety, to make sure she never went without. You're not a criminal. You're a hero. The packed courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause, something that had never happened in Judge Caprio's courtroom. But Michael shook his head. No, Your Honor. I'm just a father doing what any father should do. Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Caprio said, his voice now stronger but filled with emotion, I want you to listen to me very carefully. In 4 decades of seeing the worst of humanity, you have just shown me the very best. He turned to address the entire courtroom. This man committed a crime, yes. He stole $47 worth of food. But he did it for the purest reason imaginable, love for his child. He could have abandoned his responsibilities, declared bankruptcy, disappeared. Instead, he chose to live on the streets to ensure his daughter never suffered. But Judge Caprio's next decision would shock everyone, including Michael. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm dismissing all charges against you. Michael's knees nearly buckled. Your Honor, I don't understand. Furthermore, Judge Caprio continued, I'm ordering that the court pay the $47 for the groceries you attempted to steal. Consider it a gift from the people of Rhode Island to a daughter who has a father who loves her more than life itself. The courtroom erupted again, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. And Mr. Rodriguez, I have one more thing to tell you. Michael wiped tears from his eyes, overwhelmed by the judge's kindness. Your Honor. I want you to know that in 38 years of cases, in thousands upon thousands of decisions I've made, this moment reminds me why I became a judge in the first place. It wasn't to punish people. It was to recognize the humanity in everyone who comes before this bench. Nobody expected what Judge Caprio would reveal next about his own past. Judge Caprio walked back to his bench, but instead of sitting down, he remained standing, addressing not just Michael, but everyone in the courtroom. Mr. Rodriguez, I want to tell you something I've never shared in this courtroom before. My father was an immigrant who worked 3 jobs to support our family. There were times when we didn't have enough food, times when he went without so we could eat. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. I became a judge because I believed in justice, but also because I believed in compassion. Today, you have reminded me that sometimes the greatest crime would be punishing someone for loving their child too much. Michael was sobbing now, not from shame, but from relief and gratitude. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for understanding. But the most powerful moment was still to come. Judge Caprio reached into his own wallet and pulled out several bills. Mr. Rodriguez, this is not from the court. This is from me, personally. I want you to take Emma to dinner tonight. A real dinner, at a restaurant, where she can order whatever she wants. Michael stared at the money in disbelief. Your Honor, I can't accept this. You've already done more than. You will accept it, Judge Caprio said firmly, because every child deserves to see their father treated with dignity. And tonight, Emma will see that there are still people in this world who recognize a good man when they see one. What happened next would become legendary. The court reporter was crying as she typed. The bailiff was wiping his eyes. The prosecutor approached the bench and whispered something to Judge Caprio. Your Honor, the prosecutor said aloud, the district attorney's office would like to contribute to Mr. Rodriguez's situation. We have connections with several construction companies that are hiring. A man in the gallery stood up. Your Honor, I own Rodriguez Construction, same last name, no relation, but if Mr. Rodriguez wants a job, he's got one. Another person stood up. I run a homeless shelter. Mr. Rodriguez, you have a bed waiting for you as long as you need it. The courtroom had transformed from a place of judgment to a place of community. Judge Caprio had to use his gavel to restore order, but he was smiling through his tears. This, he said, his voice filled with wonder, this is what justice really looks like. Not punishment for the sake of punishment, but a community coming together to lift up someone who has been lifting up others all along. Michael looked around the courtroom in amazement. I don't know what to say. I never expected. I never dreamed. Say you'll take the help, Judge Caprio replied. Say you'll let us give back to someone who has given everything for love. Share this video if you believe good people deserve good things, because what Judge Caprio did next will stay with you forever. As the proceedings officially ended, Judge Caprio did something unprecedented. He came down from the bench and embraced Michael Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, he said softly, in my final week as a judge, you have given me the greatest gift possible. You reminded me why justice and mercy must always walk together. Michael held on to the judge's embrace, and whispered back, thank you for seeing the father in me instead of just the homeless man. Son, Judge Caprio replied, any man who would live on the streets for 3 years to support his child is not homeless. He's a man who has made his home in his daughter's heart. The impact of this case would extend far beyond that courtroom. Within hours, video of the proceedings had gone viral worldwide. #fatherhood and #Judge Caprio were trending globally. News outlets from every continent covered the story. But more importantly, the local community rallied around Michael Rodriguez. The construction company owner who had offered him a job also offered him a small apartment at reduced rent. The homeless shelter organized a fund that raised over $50,000 for Michael and Emma. 3 months later, something beautiful happened. Michael Rodriguez returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom, but this time as a visitor, not a defendant. He was wearing a clean construction uniform, he had gained weight, and his eyes sparkled with hope restored. With him was a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and her father's determined chin. Emma Rodriguez had come to meet the judge who had helped save her daddy. Your Honor, Michael said, I wanted Emma to meet the man who taught me that sometimes angels wear black robes. Emma stepped forward and handed Judge Caprio a drawing she had made. It showed a courtroom with a big heart in the middle and the words, thank you for helping my daddy, written in crayon. Judge Caprio later said it was the greatest payment he had ever received for his service. Emma, Judge Caprio said, kneeling down to her level, your daddy is the bravest man I've ever met. He gave up everything to make sure you were taken care of. You should be very proud of him. Emma smiled and hugged her father's leg. I always knew he was the best daddy in the world. And now, Judge Caprio replied, the whole world knows it too. As Judge Caprio reflected on his final case, he realized it had taught him the most important lesson of his career. Justice isn't just about following the law. It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone who comes before you. It's about understanding that sometimes people break rules not out of malice, but out of love. Michael Rodriguez had committed a crime, yes. But he had committed it for the most noble reason imaginable. And in that moment, Judge Caprio understood that his job wasn't just to punish lawbreakers, but to uplift the human spirit whenever possible. The case of Michael Rodriguez became Judge Caprio's final case, and his greatest triumph. It showed the world that sometimes the most profound justice comes not from punishment, but from understanding, compassion, and the recognition that love makes people do extraordinary things. In a world that often seems divided, the story of Judge Frank Caprio and Michael Rodriguez proved that humanity, compassion, and understanding can bridge any divide. Sometimes, all it takes is seeing the person behind the charges, the heart behind the desperation, and the love behind the crime. 6 months after that transformative case, the ripple effects continued to spread across America. The video of Michael Rodriguez's case had been viewed over 100 million times across all platforms. But more importantly, it had sparked a nationwide conversation about homelessness, fatherhood, and what true justice looks like in America. Judge Frank Caprio received thousands of letters from around the world. Parents thanked him for showing what sacrificial love looks like. Judges from other courts began implementing Caprio protocols, taking extra time to understand the human story behind each case. But the most significant change happened in Providence itself. The local government, inspired by the case, established the Michael Rodriguez Fund, a program that provided emergency assistance to parents facing homelessness who were still meeting their child support obligations. Within 6 months, they had helped over 200 families avoid the streets. Michael Rodriguez became an unwitting spokesman for responsible fatherhood. He was invited to speak at conferences, schools, and community centers. His message was always the same: being a father isn't about the home you provide, it's about the love you give. The construction company that hired Michael reported something remarkable. "Michael is the most dedicated employee we've ever had," said owner Roberto Martinez. "He shows up early, stays late, and treats every job like he's building something for his own daughter. His work ethic is extraordinary because he understands what it means to truly provide for someone you love." Michael had been promoted twice in 6 months. He now supervised a crew of 12 men, many of whom were also facing personal struggles. He had become known for his patience, understanding, and ability to see potential in people others had given up on. Emma Rodriguez blossomed under the stability her father's new life provided. Her teacher, Mrs. Johnson, noticed immediate changes when Michael found steady work and housing. Emma went from being a quiet, worried child to being one of the most confident and happy students in my class. She talks about her daddy constantly, how proud she is of him, how hard he works, how much he loves her. Emma had started a project at school called Heroes Don't Wear Capes, where she interviewed other children about their parents' sacrifices. The project went viral when she presented it at a school assembly, explaining how her daddy lived in his truck so she could have food and toys. Judge Caprio, meanwhile, had found new purpose in retirement. He established the Caprio Institute for Compassionate Justice, a training program for judges and legal professionals focused on seeing the humanity in every case. The program's motto, inspired by Michael's case, was simple: justice with understanding. "Michael Rodriguez taught me that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing," Judge Caprio explained to a gathering of federal judges. "The law said he committed a crime. Justice said he was a hero. A wise judge knows the difference." The homeless shelter that had offered Michael a bed experienced an unprecedented transformation. Donations poured in from around the world after the video went viral. But more importantly, the community's attitude toward homelessness shifted dramatically. Volunteers increased by 400%. Local businesses began offering jobs specifically to shelter residents. "The Michael Rodriguez case changed how our city sees homeless people," explained shelter director Sandra Williams. "People stopped seeing problems and started seeing stories. They stopped seeing failures and started seeing fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters who had fallen on hard times. Legal scholars began studying the case as a textbook example of judicial discretion. Harvard Law School included the Rodriguez case in their curriculum on judicial ethics and community justice. Professor David Mitchell wrote extensively about how Judge Caprio's decision exemplified the difference between legal positivism and natural law theory. Caprio's ruling wasn't just legally sound, it was morally necessary, Mitchell explained. He showed that the best judges don't just interpret law, they interpret humanity. The case also sparked changes in how media covers court proceedings. Television producers noted that courtroom shows focusing on compassion and human interest stories saw massive increases in viewership after the Rodriguez case went viral. People are hungry for stories that restore their faith in humanity, explained producer Lisa Chen. Court TV developed a new format called Justice with Heart, featuring judges who took time to understand the human stories behind cases. Every episode began with the disclaimer, inspired by Judge Frank Caprio and the Michael Rodriguez case. But perhaps the most powerful change was in how fathers viewed their responsibilities. Men's groups across the country began discussing the Rodriguez case as an example of what fatherhood truly means. Social media was filled with fathers sharing their own sacrifices for their children, using hashtags like #DadLoveMatters and #MichaelRodriguezChallenge. Michael Rodriguez showed us that being a father isn't about providing a house, wrote one father on Facebook. It's about providing love, stability, and the knowledge that your child matters more than your own comfort. A year later, Michael and Emma returned to Providence Courthouse for a special ceremony. Judge Caprio, though retired, was invited back to witness the dedication of the Compassionate Justice Hall, a renovated section of the courthouse designed to handle cases involving families in crisis with extra care and resources. Emma, now 8 and flourishing in school, cut the ribbon alongside her father and the judge who had changed their lives. This hall exists because sometimes people need understanding more than punishment, Judge Caprio told the gathered crowd. Michael Rodriguez reminded us that behind every case is a human being with a story worth hearing. Michael's speech that day moved everyone to tears. A year ago, I stood in that courtroom as a man who had lost everything except his love for his daughter, Michael said, his voice steady and strong. Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss my charges that day. He restored my dignity. He reminded me that being a good father isn't about what you have, it's about what you're willing to sacrifice. He looked at Emma, who beamed with pride beside him. Emma, I want you to remember this day. I want you to remember that when people show you kindness, you pass it on. Judge Caprio showed us both that there are still good people in this world who believe in love over judgment. The story of Judge Caprio and Michael Rodriguez became more than a viral video. It became a reminder that in a world that often seems harsh and unforgiving, there are still people who choose compassion over condemnation, understanding over judgment, and love over law. Judge Caprio returned to full retirement knowing that his final case had been his greatest triumph. Michael Rodriguez continued building homes for others while building a better life for his daughter. And Emma Rodriguez grew up knowing that her father was a hero who had shown the world what true love looks like. Their story proved that sometimes the most profound justice comes not from following the letter of the law, but from following the spirit of humanity that the law was meant to serve.